hospital, could you please, could I request that you remember them in your du'as, that Allah give them a speedy and complete recovery and they're back home with us very, very soon. Please remember them in your du'as. I really appreciate that. Jazakallah. Right, so today's show, we're focusing on children and young people's mental health, and we have two special guests with us today. So our first guest is in the studio, Brother Yusuf Mangera, who is a certified mindfulness-based cognitive therapist, and he is also a registered mental health nurse with over 30 years' experience working in adult mental health, working in the eating disorders inpatient team initially, and then after completing his training, returning to the team as a CBT therapist in the outpatients department. And without further ado, I wanted to learn a little bit more. I mean, it's great to see men working in this area. I don't think there's enough of it, really, to be honest. So tell me a little bit about your work and what made you go into this field.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. What made me go into, actually, this is a really interesting thing. It was because I was a mechanic.
Oh.
And I didn't like mechanics. It was too cold. When I came from Zimbabwe, we came to work here, I hated it. It was too cold. So I went to a job center and asked them for something to do with people. And they invited me to go to a healthcare, what they were starting off was called a healthcare assistance course.
Okay.
So HCA is the healthcare assistants. Now you see them all over the place. But those are the initial ones for the mental health services.
Wow.
And I said, okay, let's give it a go. I've never been in a psychiatric unit in my life. And I just got married. I just had a child and 2 children, actually. And I said, okay, changing a career, mid-career, living in the St. Matthew's estate at that time. Well, let's see how this goes. But that was like 1989, 1990. And,
wow.
And
okay.
thought, yeah. Once I got into there, I thought, yeah, you know what? I love this job. I love working with people with mental health. I love working with people with psychosis. And what I noticed was there was a lack of men. There was a lack of Muslim representation anyway. And one particular incident triggered it. I think the one particular incident which I always remember was a lady who was a Muslim lady. After eating, she had gone into the sink and she gargled her mouth. Wash her hands and gargle her mouth, and she was told off for this. So there was actually a couple of incidents. One, that was a main one of the ones, and the other one was another sister, very pious sister in hijab, and she had been quite ill, and they were going to medicate her using an injection in the backside.
Yeah.
Best way to put it, but
yeah.
And a male did it, and I thought that's not right. And I thought we need a lot more male representation, more female representation, more Muslim representation.
Yeah.
There was no one representing us. There was no one who I could see was in this field.
Yeah. So the lack of cultural awareness, lack of understanding of people's faiths, and the lack of representation from people from those communities that could advocate on behalf of these vulnerable people, that made you kind of motivated you to continue down this field. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I started off as a healthcare assistant, which was did some training, was going to the job center, get some money, but doing this training at the same time. But then decided I'm going to go to my nurse training.
MashaAllah. How long did that take you?
So that the nurse training was 3-year course at the now it's Deep Montfort, but it was the Charles Frears nursing.
Oh, I remember.
Charles Frears.
Back in the day.
Yeah, it was Charles Frears, and so 3-year course. And, it was a new kind of project, what called Project 2000 course, which was. Where you do you go into different areas. You go into child mental health. You go into learning disabilities.
Yeah.
You do adult mental health, and then you do your speciality, which is psychiatric.
MashaAllah. So that's really, really good. So would you recommend other people to go into this career?
I've always recommended it. I've always talked to people about it, and I still feel that there's still not enough representation in mental health for our people. And I think for Muslims in the community generally, I still feel lonely in that field in some sense. So, especially I suppose in inpatients and more in acute psychiatry, we need a lot more representation of Muslims
in those areas.
It's a plea almost, if anyone's out there listening.
Yeah, Rahima. And I think what you've said there, that you almost feel lonely. So us as professionals as well, you know, it can be quite isolating not having those support networks. And we, yeah, of course we create our own, but having them internally is as important. Having more of us, I think it gives you strength, and you feel kind of, you know, again, it motivates you further, doesn't it? And that support makes you a better practitioner.
I find that, you know, it's such a rewarding career. I've been so blessed, and I feel I've, you know, 30 odd years in this career I've not had a moment where I felt I'm in the wrong place, or I don't want to go to work, or, you know, it's always been enjoyable.
Mashallah, mashallah. So Rahima, a message out to our listeners.
Yeah, if you're thinking of changing career, or you've always been interested in mental health, you know, Yusuf needs you.
Yeah.
And lots of other Muslim members of staff who are kind of working in silos. We need more of you out there.
Absolutely.
Working in this field, supporting our children and adults who are struggling with their mental health.
Yeah, and supporting each other as well, because just as much as the people you're caring for and supporting, your own mental health is really important as well. So having those support networks are really important. Now, Brother Yusuf, I've got lots of questions, but I'm not going to ask them all right now because I do want to go over to my other wonderful guests. But before I do, one question. Now, obviously, you then further train. So what made you go and do some further training and become a CBT therapist? Tell me a little bit about that.
This is actually, it's quite a good development, actually, because this was part of the increasing access to psychological therapies, the IAP services. This is the services that started being developed to help people get more easy access to psychological therapies. Because what the studies have shown is that there were a lot of people off sick due to mental health issues like depression.
Yes.
Not severe mental health, but what they call medium-term, not short-term mental health issues. So depression, anxiety, stress, panic disorders, OCD, and maybe single-event traumas, that kind of stuff. So this came about because of that, and because of that, I was in a blessed position to be able to go for this extra training, to do the CBT training, and become a CBT therapist, which I felt really helped me, because it sort of gives you a sort of a therapy process, isn't it?
Yes.
To help patients through the recovery. So yeah, that was in 2011, I think.
May I ask what CBT means? I do know, but I think for our listeners, for the sake of our
It's
listeners.
cognitive behavioral therapy.
And what is that? What type of therapy is that?
Basically, it's a talking therapy, but actually, it's actually a therapy that is action as well, where we get people to think about their thoughts, but also to challenge their behaviors, to start looking at the behaviors, to start looking at, and some examples, simple stuff like depression. You'll notice that people are having negative thoughts, but at the same time, they're spending a lot of time in bed, not eating very well. So it's about challenging those behaviors, getting them to look at the why the behaviors happen, and then looking at the thoughts as well. So it's a very easy therapy to use, but it has been very popular and has it's grown exponentially.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I mean, you know, I recently did my degree in it as well, so I do know. But we know that obviously CBT is not for everybody, but it definitely is good for short term, for focusing on the now and the present, and you know, like you said, those negative thoughts that an individual may have. So yeah, Jazakallah for that. I'm going to come back to you in a bit. Now I'm going to go on to my other guest who's joined us on Zoom all the way from London. Sahar, you can tell me where, because I'm not sure. I might end up saying the wrong thing. So Sahar Beg is an experienced counsellor psychotherapist. She's been practicing for the last 25 years, so very experienced. She's the founder of Mindworks UK, a low-cost counselling service primarily supporting vulnerable and disadvantaged communities in London and wider. And Sahar is also founder of Tooting Community Kitchen, which provides food packs, winter wear, and a food bank. So, Sahar, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you go into this field.
Alaikum salam. Thank you for inviting me to be on your program, mashallah. Well done, Rehana. It's good to be here.
Welcome. We're honoured to have you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually, because coming into this work, I came into it by default, to be fair. it wasn't a chosen field. It was just like literally, it was meant to be.
SubhanAllah.
So the work that I do, I mean, I studied quite later on in life after I got married, and then I wanted to become a fashion designer, believe it or not. But that path and that choice wasn't to be. So the path that did come about was to come into counselling initially. So I undertook a counselling course, which my husband kind of found for me at the time, and said, "Oh, you know, you're really good at talking to people and listening to people, and you know, you signpost really well, and you know, why don't you do this?"
MashaAllah.
So I did the skills and the theory, and I thought, okay, this does look a bit, it sounds okay. I'm learning something here, and I'm understanding a lot about myself. And that was really one of the things that then led me to carry on the study, but also then having therapy, because to be a therapist, you really need to understand your own self.
Absolutely.
And that was more or less the first time I had kind of counseling per se. And it was mind blowing. I had a couple of counselors that I didn't really get on with. I think that was because the culture mix wasn't right. I grew up in South London, or southwest of London, a place called Tooting.
There you go.
There we are, with Tooting Broadway. And I grew up with, it was not a very good balance of mix or within the Asian culture, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did my diploma in counselling and had placements, and my career path kind of took on from there. I worked with an established psychological employee assistant program for about 10 years, and that was where I gained a lot of exposure and a lot of work, training and so forth. Led me to do more education as well in the field of counselling,
MashaAllah.
EMDR and so forth, and CBT.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. And I think that exposure and that wealth of experience, it really it kind of encouraged me even more so to look at, you know, not just to look in the view that I had working in the corporate world, but also what's going on around me. And that was a bit blurred because all I knew for the 10 years was what I'm doing in the corporate world.
Yes. Yeah.
And although it was amazing and fantastic, I kind of started working then with another charity halfway through the work that I was doing, and working with young people. It was a prevention of teenage pregnancy program predominantly, but where we were able to teach children that, you know, look at their interpersonal skills and how they use them. And so it's a 20-week project, school term time. I did that for about another 10 years as well. And then I, you know, left because it's a bit of a mishmash, a bit of an overlap with my corporate world and the charity that I was working with. So I lessened the hours that I was working for the corporate company. And then I realized, you realize at that point, if you have children as well, how much of an impact that your well-being is supported by your parents or your caregiver or your guardian.
Yes.
Or not.
Yes.
And I carried on working in that field for a long time, and that's one of my passions even now, working with young people.
MashaAllah, brilliant.
So, you know, managing some, you know, women's domestic violence refuge centres, and you know, that was a wealth of experience and exposure. But then my heart was still not content, so I resigned and left all the work that I was doing in 2014.
She says with a big smile on her face.
It's the best thing I've done, actually.
SubhanAllah.
Not for me, but for the community.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's the community-based project,
MashaAllah.
organisation. You know, I might have created it, but with it, you know, it's working with the therapists and the counsellors and the management team that I have.
MashaAllah.
So in 2014, it was actually September, MindWorks UK was born.
MashaAllah.
And I had one contract at the time, which was a Feasibillah contract. It's a free contract completely. And it was for revert Muslims.
MashaAllah.
And the reason for that is I'm a revert Muslim. You know, I came into Islam. I know more about Islam than I do of my old faith. But it just feels I was born into this. I was born into Islam. And I was like only 16 when I reverted. So it's many, many moons ago, Rehana.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
SubhanAllah. and I've got this real passion just for helping. And if I can't help somebody, I know there's going to be someone. So the signposting is really equally important, that we have, like Brother Yusuf was mentioning, having many more people access to services, encouraging more people to train in the field. It's so important and key for us. And the movement is happening slowly but surely, inshallah.
Inshallah, yes, absolutely.
And it's really important to have a really good signposting service, whether it's Muslim service or a non-Muslim service, but somewhere where we know we can get the correct support and advice for people that need it.
And I think I know that we need to get onto our topic, but I think what you've said, Sahar, there about professionals being properly trained and continue to train, that continual professional development is really important. And when we're talking about counselling and psychotherapy, making sure people who are maybe accessing those kind of services for the first time, especially if they're doing it privately, are mindful and aware of the credentials of individuals who are giving that therapy, because not everybody is qualified. For example, just because I have a CBT degree does not mean I can practice. So it's really important that we do signpost people on to the right people. And if we don't have those services within our own community, then signposting them elsewhere. And not everybody actually wants a Muslim therapist, and that is an individual choice too. And that may be dependent on the experiences they've had, the negative experiences. So we have to be very mindful that it's not, one shoe fits all. So it's being, equipping people with the information they need to access whatever service. Those informed choices is really important. Okay, I'm going to go back to Brother Yusuf and then quickly come back to you to touch upon your charities, and then we've got to get on because I know time is ticking by. Brother Yusuf, now you've worked in the community for a long time, working with children and young people in your other role. So tell us a little bit more about your scout role.
That's my other passion. This is something that Sheikh Zakir from Darul Arqam, a big shout out to him.
MashaAllah.
He came to my house and said, well, why don't we start off something, scouting? I've never been camping in my life again, never done it before.
Oh, really?
Said, well, what do you want me to do about it? I said, well, just set up something and start something. And so from that moment we decided. So that was in 2008, 2009, I think, when we decided that we're going to do some scouting and set up this scout group and got lots of leaders involved. It was very, very successful. We were based initially in Mir Road.
MashaAllah.
Mir Road, the Scouts Hall there, and we had hundreds of kids turn up every week. And
wow.
The surprising thing, and I'll say this without even to this day, is that I get more girls involved
MashaAllah.
in scouting than boys. Now even more so now. I get more girls wanting to be scouts. And it just became something that I felt, wow, this is really good. Because, what we're planting in, and I remember someone saying that we should have, I think it was Sheikh Hamza Yusuf saying that, we should have a 100-year plan.
MashaAllah.
And I thought, well, if you want to have a 100-year plan, you have to start with the young people. So we had a Cubs group, which is from 6 to 8. 8 to 10.
MashaAllah.
We have Scouts group from 10 to 14.
MashaAllah.
Unfortunately, one we didn't have is an Explorer group, which is taking them further to become Explorer leaders and become more
MashaAllah.
leaders. So that's where we sort of didn't do too well. But I think over the years we've had so many children get involved with it, and we just about scaling them up for life. I just heard a quote recently that when working with young people, you might see a result initially within a few minutes or not, or you may see it within 10 years.
Absolutely. So it's the investment, initial investment, and you don't see the immediate results. But you see them. You may bump into that same young person 10 years later, and you see the change, and you just. I think, I don't know about you, but for me, it'll be like, I know that I didn't make this happen, but that tiny little conversation I had with this person, or the tiny little seed that we planted, inshallah, we're hoping that helped them, spurred them on. But it's an honor, isn't it, when you meet them and they're doing so well and they thank you.
That's what happened to me.
MashaAllah.
Happened to me. So I meet a couple of young people, and they say, what, scouting has given me that confidence. Yeah. And you see this, the confidence grows, they become when they're camping together, they have to build a camp together, to build a fire together. They have to find the firewood, cook the food, cook their own food. Gives them that sense of bonding together.
May I ask? So, is this group still going?
Yes,
I'm sure Rehima wants to know for her boys as well a little bit more about this.
So, whereabouts are you based now?
Well, currently we're based at the community centre, the Balderston Close at the name gone.
Is it Coleman?
Coleman Neighbourhood Centre. Yeah, sorry,
okay.
that's it. Yeah, Coleman Neighbourhood Centre. So we've been there for the last 3-4 years now.
Okay.
I've been running the sessions from there. Again, another thing that we struggle with mostly is leaders.
Okay, so do you want to put out an appeal for leaders?
Or is it just a regular Scouts group?
It's a regular Scouts group for Cubs. We got now Cubs, Beavers, and Scouts.
Mashallah.
So it's an age group from 6 to 14 and a half to 15 years.
Okay.
So we cover the whole range.
So, Brother Yusuf, you said leaders. So do you want to put out an appeal? This is your opportunity.
Yeah, we really are looking for young people, anyone who wants to be involved in scouting, to come forward and talk to me about it, because what we find is that we have loads of children wanting to join. I mean, children want to join all the time. We've got a waiting list of young people wanting to join, but we haven't got enough leaders trained. And alhamdulillah, recently we've had some leaders sisters who came. Again, it's the sisters again.
Mashallah.
I've had several sisters come in, and they've new sisters have come in. Yeah, exactly. So there's a shout out to really the brothers. You guys.
So, what age do you have to be to volunteer to become a leader?
You can be from 18 onwards.
18 onwards,
yeah.
And how much commitment is required?
That is also not. It's all up to you how much you want to commit to it.
Yeah.
What we do is we can have a rota of leaders.
Mashallah.
The Scouts provides free training.
Mashallah.
You have to go. The CRB is done for free. The
Mashallah.
TBS is done for free. The training is done for free, and all you have to do is come when you can and
turn up.
Turn up on a session. You can run a session if you have an interest in something. If you're an engineer, and you can run a session on engineering. If you're a plumber, you can do a plumbing session. And all this is about kids earning badges and becoming skilled and knowledgeable about certain aspects of their life. So what the Scouts does is just gives them that sense of unity, given a sense of
mashallah. That's really good.
So you're the 115th Leicester Scout group.
That's
so if anyone's interested, they can Google you and search you, and you've got a Facebook page and so on. So
right. So Rehima, our topic today: children and young people's mental health. So do you want to read out some stats?
Mental health problems affect around 1 in 6 children, and these can include depression, anxiety, and conduct disorder, a type of behavioral problem, and are often a direct response to what is happening in their lives. And that's from the Mental Health Foundation.
Okay. And I know the current research that was done in July 2021 has shown that 1 in 6 children aged between 5 to 16 were identified as having a mental health problem. That was in July 2021, during the pandemic. A huge increase, because previously it was 1 in 9 in 2017. So that, if we equate that to 5 children in every classroom.
Gosh.
That's quite a lot.
That is quite high. Yeah. And the stat that you read earlier about predominantly Asian women being at higher, younger women self-harming.
That's right. So
really shocking statistic to hear.
Yeah, so research by Lavis done in 2014 showed that there was a high prevalence of self-harm in young South Asian women aged 16 to 24 years. So, that's just 1 or 2 figures we're showing. The other one that I wanted to point out was that we know that the pandemic has had an impact on people's mental health problems, including children and young people. So 83% of young people that were surveyed by Young Minds in the summer of 2020 were found that what they did was they reported that their mental health had worsened as a result of the pandemic. Yeah. And the other one I wanted to point out was that suicide was the leading cause of death for males and females aged between 5 to 34 in 2019. That's a Office for National Statistics data. Yeah. So moving on from there, Sister Sahar, would you like to start the conversation, and then Brother Yusuf, you join in as we go along.
So just in regards to children's mental health, I mean, there's huge. I mean, I was just looking at, when you asked me to come on the show, I was looking at the place to be statistics, and it's around the same actually. 1 in 6 children who are diagnosable with mental health, and it's really sad, isn't it? I mean, it's like, this shouldn't be happening, and we really need to have really keen interventions. When we look at the impact of the children's mental health, and where it's stemming from and how it's coming about, and from when I grew up, much has changed, but the issues haven't changed.
So,
do you see?
What would you say? What are the factors that are most likely to impact on a child or young person's mental health?
So, putting social media to one side for a moment, because that's a big topic in itself.
Yeah. Let's park Instagram.
Yes, it's a huge topic. I think we need more than an hour on the show. But I, for me, looking at what we have coming through our services is, the family dynamics at home, school situations, their peer groups, the bullying, harassment, cultural issues come up around a lot of racism within many, not within just the Asians, but with many of the young people. Food poverty is another thing that we've noticed. When children are malnourished, the mental health is affected, and there's a lot of deprivation, and more so right now as we know it, unfortunately. Housing, where a child lives, if they're in supported housing, temporary housing, or in a refuge, huge impact on children. We have so many refugees that we support, and the mental health, they've come from different areas of life, and disruption from and displacement. So when we look at these, and there's many more, I know Brother Yusuf may want to add, inshallah, but there's just so much that a young person impacts from when they're born, from when they're in the mother's womb. How is the mother feeling? The mental health issues from parents, mother. I mean, that's another topic in itself. And
absolutely,
all the layers are just on top of each other.
That's right.
I was thinking that maybe we can ask both Brother Yusuf and the same question to yourself, Sahar, but from the work that you see and the intervention work that you do, what are some of the signs that you'd see in young people and children when that young person is struggling? What are some of the signs people are to look out for, or the listeners at home?
Okay. Is this to me or to Brother Yusuf? Sorry.
To both. But if Brother Yusuf wants to go first, and then we'll bring you back in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we get to see a lot of the signs and symptoms of basic mental health. I think what I've noticed, I mean, this when I was working in the IAPT, and I noticed this quite significantly, is that there were a lot of people with social anxiety. Okay, starting off with social anxiety, panic attacks, panic, traumas. Okay, trauma. We were getting a lot of those kind of patients coming through. And these are young people. These are 16, 17, 18-year-olds.
So Brother Yusuf, when you say social anxiety, should we just explain to our listeners what we mean by that?
Yeah, basically they become inward focused. They have a difficulty in creating or socializing within groups. They become more isolated. They become more depressed and anxious because of that. And the isolation, they start to question their own self-esteem, I suppose. And I suppose the underlying thing, and I think maybe Sister Sahar can agree, the underlying thing is a lot of low self-esteem, underlying low self-esteem. Now, that can develop from a very early age.
Yes.
Again, Sister Sahar mentioned bullying. I'm currently working with a patient who was extremely bullied because of her shape and size.
Okay.
She was kicked, she was hit, she was pushed down the toilet toilet sink.
Awful.
So basically, all this kind of stuff has an impact. This was happening when she was 12, 13, 14. And now she's developed this severe eating disorder.
As a result
of that. So that's one of the things that Sister Sahar mentioned is the bullying that can happen. For me, I suppose it's about early life attachments. you know, how do we, a parent, we all going to mess our kids up in some ways as parents, I think,
it's true.
We're never perfect as parents, but I think we're always going to mess. But I think our attachments, and that's really, really important. And this is where I think parents can have a big role to play, is, listening and becoming more aware of their young person's anxieties and getting the information about it. So, if a child if they're between 6 and 11 years old, they need to be learned to be able to be, independent and start developing. Others, they start feeling inferior.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. If the foundations are stable at home,
yes.
Obviously it's going to have a huge benefit to that young person, to that child growing up, and having a good bond and a relationship with your parents, so you're able to tell them if something is going wrong instead of keeping it to yourself. But as Sahar's mentioned, not everybody has those experiences. When there's domestic abuse in the household, if the parent themselves is having mental health problems, if there is housing issues, poverty, all of those things impact, trauma, all of these things have huge impact on the young person or the child. But regardless of whatever the factors are, sometimes you can have everything. You can, it looks on the outside that, why is that child struggling? They've got a private education, they've got a beautiful home, the parents are wealthy, they give them everything, go on holidays 4 times a year, whatever it is. But it isn't always that, is it, Sahar?
No, absolutely not. I just want to go back to what Brother Yusuf mentioned about the attachments, because I think that's the key thing here. And I was a very young parent, so I didn't have all the parent skills. Might have looked after my nephew and niece when I was little, but we're not born with parent skills. And this is really, really key for new parents or older parents, young parents as well, that you don't just fall into it and it. And it's okay to get the help and support, to get parent support from house visitors, through the nurseries, through the schools. It's really key that parents don't have to do this alone.
Agree.
And understanding what attachment means. If you're a right young mother, I was a young mother at 17, so it's really hard. For me, I can just say personally, well, how do we attach? What do we do? It's like, oh my God, I'm this little thing here. I don't know what to do with it. And there's many people on the teenage programs that I've spoken on. They when they have to do mentoring with little 4 and 5-year-olds, they say, oh my God, this is really hard work. So imagine having to do it for 24 hours a day. You are the key person for them, to forming attachments from when a baby's in the tummy right through when they're born to being a toddler. Because I think how we talk to our children, how we are with them, where we give them eye contact, are we listening, are we talking, are we having conversations, or are we just screaming and shouting because the parents are too stressed with other things going on for themselves in life, and then there's that breakdown. So the attachment is the fundamental thing here for a child, and if a child is displaced, not living with their family or their parents, there's a different kind of attachment then being formed with the caregiver, the guardian, the foster parent, etc., and so forth. So there is always going to be a bit wobbly.
And I think
they don't be wobbly on their own.
And I think you're right. What you've said about being really honest about the fact that we don't come prepared to be parents. It's something we learn along the way, and we are going to make mistakes, and that's okay too. But as long as we're trying, and as you say, we're very mindful how we speak to our children, what kind of dialogue we're using. If it's very negative, how that can have long-term impact. If we transfer our own anxieties and fears onto our children, they inherit things they don't need to be inheriting.
Absolutely.
And how that can have long-term impact. So I know Rahima mentioned about how do we know when a child is struggling? So what kind of signs would be indicators that something is not right? So parents listening out there, I think this would be a good question to answer. So between the both of you, it'd be great. Brother Yusuf, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think one of the first signs, is that you find the child is isolating themselves.
Okay.
Becoming a bit withdrawn. You might notice that they start acting out. They might be aggressive in their behavior. All of a sudden, this child is normally okay and starting becoming more and more aggressive. You find that's one of the most common signs of of a child struggling internally with themselves, because they don't know how to explain, how to describe what they're going through. It's hard for them to verbalize that. So if a child finds it hard to verbalize, they're going to scream, they're going to shout, might do some behaviors that are weird and odd. They might stay out late, they might be doing other things that you might feel, well, this is odd.
This is not normal for this person, but it's their way of communicating that something is not right, because children and young people don't necessarily have that emotional intelligence at that age to tell you what is wrong. They might not know themselves what's wrong. So these are the kind of indicators. Sahar, do you want to add to those?
Yeah, I'd like to, because I think Brother Yusuf just hit something there around how we talk, the language. If we can equip our young children, young people with language and words that they can identify with what they're feeling. And I know there's a lot of courses and things that teach therapists and things, but for parents as well, to understand, if my child is wet in the bed, for instance, how can they explain what's going on if they don't know? It could be a medical issue, or if they're going to late at school, or things you'll notice at home. If your child is sleeping all the time, or brother was said they're withdrawn. It's being very aware, and you can only be very aware of your child even if you're with them all the time and you take notice of them.
And I think
you're in a big family, children get missed.
That's a really, really good point, that children get missed. And I think it's also the same for where there's a family where another sibling has got care needs, and so the time and effort is focused on the child with the needs, and the young carer often can get neglected. And that's not intentional, but it happens.
No, absolutely.
But also, I think what you've said there around the relationship and the education, I think, it is my belief that we should all educate ourselves and have that basic mental health awareness, and parenting skills are really important as well. And there are free courses out there now, Sister Sahar. They're government-funded courses, free courses, but people can do them online if they haven't got the time to go out and do them in their own time. Having that basic knowledge is really important. And there's a whole drive at the moment within schools that we're trying to educate our children to have that language and the education about their emotions and their feelings, and that basic mental well-being, mental health awareness. I think all of those are really good issues. Rehana, we got a message.
We have got some messages. Message from Aisha Sidat. It's important as well for parents to show an understanding and supportive nature towards their children, so then they are more open to their parents. I definitely agree with that, because if you don't have that relationship with your parents, you're most likely to do things behind their back.
Another message.
Yusuf Abdul, in Africa, most homes do not train the children to speak their mind, so it's I guess what Yusuf's saying is it's quite restricted in what children can and can't say.
Yeah, but there's also the other end of the scale where where children are perfectionistic in some ways.
Yes.
Where they think, and then they start judging themselves negatively because they can't achieve something. So it's a whole
spectrum, isn't it?
Spectrum of it. So you got one end where someone is just feeling withdrawing, but the other end where they're achieving so much, but they feel that they're failing. They still feel this way.
So, Brother Yusuf, on that end, I suppose it's twofold. One is the expectations of others on us.
Yeah.
So it could be, the expectations of parents. So parents, be mindful. And I speak from experience. We can have these huge expectations. We can put huge pressure on our children and young people.
Absolutely.
So be mindful of that. And the other is those children who perhaps are doing really well at school or in madrasa. They're achieving, they're top performers, and all of a sudden they hit a knock, and then boom, that hits them. And they're not equipped to cope with failure because the push from external, whether it be teachers, whether it be parents, has always been, you're the best, you've got to keep performing to the best, but not to the best of your capability, not necessarily be the top in your class, So, Sister Sahar, do you want to come in there?
I was just going to say, because there's a few young teenagers that we are supporting, and we're doing the parent support with it. So we have the family therapist, and we can, and I do lots of personal one-to-one parent support.
Mashallah.
And it's it's this expectation that they have, and also that when the child expects, has this expectation put on them, it's put on them from the parent that, okay, you've got to be, I want you to do X, Y, Z, follow the footsteps of your father or your mother, their doctor, accountant, whatever it might be in that professional field. And then the anxieties and the stresses that come up. And, we've had a few young people who've had breakdowns because of it. They're doing really bright young people, but the anxieties and the stresses of, not getting 99%.
Yeah, that pressure.
And it's like, oh my God, now I can't, what am I going to do? And their hearts are pounding and they're sweating and all these things. They don't know what's happening to them.
Yes.
And they have a breakdown, and family thinking what's going on, with their child. And I think it's really just, breaking down these kind of barriers is really important within the family unit. It's like, please don't expect anything. If your child wants to study, let them study. If they're not ready for it, it's fine. Don't push them.
I agree, totally.
I think things have changed so much. I think especially with now post-pandemic, where university was kind of empty. Everything was online. I know from many young people, the anxieties of being home and not being at university, that being in the having the fun at university, that the area, just having that lifestyle of university, they've missed out. Most of them have missed out for 3 years now.
That's right.
Almost.
Yeah.
It's been online, so they've not had that experience or exposure. And then their social skills.
Yeah, and I suppose
everything this is has a knock-on effect.
And I suppose this is where some people have developed social anxiety as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brother Yusuf, I know I'm really mindful of time, and there are a couple of things I want to get through, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to make your point as well.
Just touching on that point about perfectionism. The perfectionism can come from within the child as well. But unrelenting high standards, the unrelenting high standards. But that's within the society, within the key, especially girls.
Yes.
This is something I've noticed within girls, is that they're so driven, they're so, want to achieve such a high level of, success. But then, when they can't meet that they become very anxious and very upset. And I think it's quite linked to that self-esteem as well then.
Absolutely. And I think, having that basic understanding, us as adults who may be supporting that young person or child, is really, really important. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a professional. You can be the auntie. Yeah. They may not be able to talk to their parents. You could be the grandparent. Be open-minded and non-judgmental and listen. And I mean active listening, not, yes, I'm listening, bita, and then you're on the phone or you're cooking. Sit down and focus and really listen. Watch their body language, listen to their tone of voice, what they're saying, not just the words, because sometimes they're unable to tell you.
It's kind of being non-judgmental as well.
Yeah.
Not you should have or you could have, and bringing in all of those. But
so instead of your take,
find out what's concerning your child and ask them how you can help keep that communication open.
Absolutely. So
there's also a kind of message to any children and young people out there as well, to say if you're struggling with your feelings, you're not alone. Help is available. Talk to someone you trust. Talk to your parents, someone at school. There's lots of helplines available as well. You're not alone out there.
Brilliant. And I think Rahima's given some really good pointers there. I just want to say to parents and young people who are listening out there, Young Minds is a very good website. Mind as well. Shout is a good tech service. Obviously NSPCC, Bernardo's, Sahar and Brother Yusuf, would you like to add any more?
I think the Muslim Youth Helpline.
Oh yes, I forgot.
Definitely.
Inshallah.
Helpline, very good
Yeah,
organization.
very
They're
good.
also very supportive as well.
Yeah. Any other, Sahar?
Well, I was going to say for parents who, you've got my list there. You just rolled it off, so it's brilliant. Alhamdulillah. But as Brother Yusuf was saying, Muslim Youth Helpline are amazing. We do signpost there actually, because not every child wants to have counselling. They just want to talk to somebody.
That's
so
right.
It's a really good listening service, mashallah. And there's other like-minded organisations. And for directories as well, if you want a particularly Muslim counsellor, there's the Muslim Counselling and Psychotherapy Network, as well as the
Jazakallah
BACP.
so much. And really mindful.
Time now.
Yeah.
Really sorry. Right. Jazakallah so much, Sister Sahar. I wish you all the best with your Tutin Kitchen as well, which is a charity that supports people who are struggling and homeless people as well. Wish you all the best with your Scout group as well, Brother Yusuf, and obviously both of you with your careers. Jazakallah so much. May Allah bless you.